The phone shattered the silence. It didn't just ring. It tore through the fabric of the Harlem night, a mechanical scream that ripped away any pretense of peace. In the dead hours between yesterday and tomorrow, such a sound only ever heralds disaster. In the dark of a well-appointed bedroom, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson's eyes opened instantly. Sleep, for a man like him, was a thin veneer. His hand moved not to the lamp on the nightstand, but past it, his fingers finding the familiar cold checkering of a .45 automatic pistol. This was the first gesture, the fundamental instinct. Feel for the weapon, then for the truth. He picked up the heavy receiver with his other hand. Silence first, but a loaded silence. Then breathing, heavy, wet, the sound of multiple men crowded close to the mouthpiece. The acoustics were small, boxy, a confined space, a basement perhaps, or a warehouse. A voice cut through the static, a syrupy southern drawl that oozed across the line. "Even in, Mr. Johnson, or should I say, good mornin'. You listenin' real good for me." Bumpy's grip tightened on the pistol. His voice was a low gravel. "Who is this?" "A concerned citizen, but we ain't the important ones right now. We got someone here who's mighty eager to say hello." There was a scuffle, the thump of a body against wood, a gagged protest. Then the gag was pulled away. The voice that came through was familiar, but distorted by a terror so profound it had stripped away every ounce of the man's character. This was not the booming, joyful laugh of Marcus Washington, the man who could light up the smoky back room of any club. This was a broken, airless rasp. "Bumpy, oh God, Bumpy, they got me. They're talking about fire, Bump. They got cans of it." The voice was yanked away, replaced by a sharp slap and a whimper. The southern drawl returned, calm, almost pedagogical. "Your associate, Mr. Washington. He's been steppin' out of his lane, talkin' to unions he shouldn't talk to, mackin' promises in neighborhoods where white men still hold the deed, stirring up ideas. You know how it is, Mr. Johnson. A man needs to know his place or he needs to be shown it." "Where is he?" Bumpy's words were ice. "Somewhere you can't get to, not in the time you got. We ain't callin' for a negotiation. We're callin' for an audience. You're gonna listen." Then came the sound, a thick glugging splash followed by another and another. The acoustics of the room amplified it. Bumpy knew that sound intimately, the heavy pour of liquid, not water. The chemical reek of high-octane gasoline seemed to ghost through the telephone wire, flooding his own dark bedroom. His stomach clenched, a primal cold seizing his core. "You hear that, Mr. Johnson? That's the sound of progress. 10 gallons of premium. Your friend Marcus is gettin' a baptism. He's standin' in a pretty little circle of it right now." There was a scratch, brief and sharp, the strike of a match against a striker plate. Marcus's voice erupted, a shriek that bypassed language entirely. "No, please, Bumpy, help him." The sound that followed was not an explosion, but a deep, hungry asterisk whoosh asterisk, the ignition of vapor, then liquid. And then the screaming began in earnest. It was a sound Bumpy had never heard, a sound no person should ever hear. It was pure, unmediated agony, a biological siren as fire consumed nerve endings, flesh, and hope. It was the sound of a soul being burned alive. Bumpy pressed the receiver hard against his ear, his own breath frozen in his chest. He was a prisoner to this auditory horror, and underneath the horrific symphony of his friends dying he heard it, laughter, chuckles, guffaws, the jovial sounds of men sharing a good joke. 6 distinct voices, maybe 7, enjoying the show. The southern voice came back close to the phone, intimate. "You listenin'? This is pedagogy, Mr. Johnson. This is what happens when the natural order is challenged. Skin blisters and peels first. Then the fat underneath, it pops and sizzles like breakfast bacon. Takes a man about 4 minutes to fully depart this world this way. We're timmin' it." Bumpy said nothing. He was memorizing the cadence, the slight lisp on the S, the texture of the evil. "I'm gonna find you," Bumpy said, his voice so quiet it was almost inaudible, yet it carried a finality that cut through the screams. "We're counting on it. Name's Thomas Whitmore. Used to be a sheriff down in Mobile. I presided over 17 tree decorations in 5 years. 17. Came north 'cause the work down there was getting soft. Thought I'd bring some real order to the big city. Looks like my first lesson in New York is Bane, delivered right now." The screaming was changing, guttering, becoming wetter, more choked. After an eternity, it faded to a weak moan, then a silence more terrible than any sound. "He's done," Whitmore announced, matter of fact. 4 minutes and 8 seconds. "Your friend is charcoal, Mr. Johnson, and you just sat on the other end of the telephone and listened. Remember that feeling, that impotence, that's your new place." The line went dead with a definitive click. Bumpy sat motionless in the dark, the dial tone droning in his ear like the hum of a dead world. The images his mind painted were worse than any photograph. The smell of cooked meat seemed to cling to his nostrils. His wife Mame stirred beside him. "Bumpy, what is it? Who was that?" He couldn't answer. He slowly placed the receiver back in its cradle, the sound absurdly final. He walked to the window, looking out over the sleeping rooftops of Harlem. Somewhere out there in the pre-dawn gloom, Marcus Washington's body was cooling on a concrete floor. Somewhere out there, 6 men were wiping their hands, slapping each other on the back. He picked up the phone again, his movements precise, mechanical. He dialed a number from memory. It was answered on the first ring. "Illinois. Get everyone the office, 1 hour." Illinois Gordon, his most trusted lieutenant, heard the glacier in Bumpy's voice. "What's happened, boss?" "They burned Marcus alive. They called me and made me listen to the whole thing." The silence on the line was heavy. "I'm on my way." Bumpy turned. Mame was sitting up now, the sheet pulled to her chin, her eyes wide with dread. She had known Marcus and his wife Angela for years. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. Bumpy looked from her to the window, at his kingdom, at his people who believed he was a shield. "They gave me 6 voices on that phone, 6 men laughing. I'm going to find every last one of them, and I'm going to return the favor, 4 minutes each, 1 per day until they're all ash." The body was found just after sunrise, not by Bumpy's men, but by a cleaning woman on her way to an early shift. The KKK hadn't hidden their work. They'd displayed it. Marcus Washington's remains were left in a vacant lot on 125th Street, a grotesque monument. The fire had contorted his body into a pugilistic pose, arms raised as if still fending off the flames. His skin was a horrific canvas of black char and cracked, weeping red. His face was unrecognizable, a melted mask with a permanent, silent scream. A crude sign driven into the ground next to him bore a message in red paint. "This is for the uppity." When Bumpy arrived, a crowd had gathered, held back by a palpable mixture of horror and rage. Illinois Gordon stood by the body, having covered what he could with his own overcoat. The police were there, too. Detective Michael Brennan, a man who walked the tightrope between the NYPD and the neighborhood's reality, observed the scene with a weary cynicism. He caught Illinois' eye and nodded him over. "Tell Mr. Johnson I know what he's thinking," Brennan muttered, lighting a cigarette. "My hands are tied. The Klan doesn't leave witnesses, but," he exhaled a plume of smoke, "if he were to pursue his own line of inquiry, the department would find itself unusually preoccupied elsewhere for the next week or so. You understand?" "I understand you're not gonna lift a finger," Illinois said. "I'm lifting this one," Brennan said, tapping his own temple, "to give him a head start. After that, it's on him, and so are the consequences." Bumpy walked past them through the parted crowd. He knelt beside the ruin of his friend. He didn't weep. He studied. He committed every horrific detail to memory, letting the fury crystallize into something cold, hard, and operational. He stood and addressed the crowd, his voice not loud but carrying to the edges. "They did this to send a message. They think fear is a language we understand. They are mistaken. This does not end here. This starts here." The hunt began not with technology, but with currency and fear. Illinois Gordon visited the New York Telephone Company with a brick of cash, tracing the call to a payphone in Brooklyn. From there, it was a trail of whispers. A night watchman who saw a white truck with a missing headlight, a drunk dock worker who remembered raucous laughter from an old warehouse on Van Brunt Street. Bumpy's network was Harlem itself. 1,000 eyes, 1,000 grudges, 1,000 people who knew that his justice, while brutal, was their justice. Within 3 days they had names, pulled from the mouth of a captured low-level Klansman named Raymond Hollies after some persuasive conversation in a basement. Bobby Lee Crawford, Vernon Tucker, James Patterson, Earl Dixon. And at the top, the sheriff from hell himself, Thomas Whitmore. The retribution was methodical, a grim inversion of the original crime. Day 1. Raymond Hollies was taken from his night shift at a meatpacking plant. He was brought to the very warehouse where Marcus had died, the stench still clinging to the air. They tied him to a chair placed in the center of the scorch mark. Bumpy stood before him, holding a box of matches. "You held the phone," Bumpy said, his voice empty. "You made me listen." The pleas, the offers of money, the screams for mercy were just noise. Gasoline was poured. A match was struck. Bumpy watched, his pocket watch in hand, as Hollies burned for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. A note was pinned to the charred remains. 1. Day 2, 2 more names were crossed off. Bobby Lee Crawford, taken from a bar. Vernon Tucker, seized from his hardware store. The process was repeated with a terrifying assembly line efficiency. Notes 2, 3. The whispers in Harlem grew from grief to a grim, vengeful hope. The whispers in Brooklyn's white enclaves curdled into fear. Day 3. The trap. Thinking James Patterson would be an easy mark, 2 of Bumpy's best men, Quick Jackson and Marcus Cole, walked into an ambush in Patterson's apartment. Patterson was no fool, he was a seasoned hunter. Gunfire filled the small space. Quick took a round to the chest. Marcus Cole wounded himself, dragged his friend out into a back alley doctor, but it was too late. Quick Jackson bled out on a stainless steel table, his last words a wet whisper, "Finish it for Marcus." The cost of the war had just been made violently, personally clear. Bumpy went to tell Quick's mother. He expected fury, grief turned against him. Instead, the old woman, her face a landscape of sorrow, straightened her spine and said, "You finish what you started, Mr. Johnson. You finish it for my boy and for Marcus. You stop now and his blood is on you. You go on and it's on them." The conflict escalated. The next afternoon, a bomb fashioned from dynamite and nails tore through the front of Bumpy's nightclub, the Rhythm Club. 3 patrons were injured. The explosion brought a new player, the FBI in the form of Agent Morrison, a man with a sharp suit and sharper eyes who saw patterns. "Your friend burned. Now 4 Klansmen have burned. That's not a coincidence, Mr. Johnson, that's a signature. You have 48 hours to enjoy your freedom. Then I'm taking you in for murder." Minutes later, Whitmore called, his voice triumphant. "You see, for every one of mine, I take 10 of yours. I'll burn Harlem to the ground around you." Bumpy's reply was quiet. "You started counting, Whitmore. I'm just doing the math for you." With the FBI's clock ticking, Bumpy changed tactics. He sent word publicly that he would be at Marcus Washington's grave at dusk, alone and unarmed, to pay his respects. It was a blatant lure. James Patterson and Earl Dixon, hungry for the glory of killing Bumpy Johnson themselves, took the bait. They brought 3 others. As they surrounded the solitary figure by the headstone, Bumpy looked up. "Who said I was alone?" From behind mausoleums and oak trees, Illinois, Marcus Cole, Willie Lee, and 10 other men emerged, weapons drawn. The shootout was swift and merciless. Patterson and Dixon were captured alive. That night in the cemetery, under the indifferent stars, gasoline was poured once more. 2 more fires lit the darkness. Notes: 5. 1 remains. Day 6. The final equation. Thomas Whitmore was holed up in a fortified warehouse on Baltic Street, a fortress with boarded windows and a small army of loyalists. A direct assault was suicide. So Bumpy used Whitmore's own arrogance against him. He called, his voice stripped of its usual iron, feigning defeat. "It's over, Whitmore. The FBI is on me. I'd rather you have the satisfaction than them. I'm coming out." While Whitmore and his men preened and prepared for their victory, Bumpy's men moved like shadows. Barrels of kerosene and gasoline were rolled against the warehouse's wooden siding. Positions were taken on surrounding rooftops. At the appointed hour, Bumpy called again. "One question before I come out. Did Marcus suffer at the end?" Whitmore's laugh was a joyless thing. "He suffered beautiful, Johnson. He screamed like a stuck pig for every one of those 4 minutes." "Good," Bumpy said, his voice now flat and final. "I wanted to be sure you'd know what to expect." He hung up. A moment later, the night erupted. Molotov cocktails sailed through the air, smashing through boarded windows. The fuel-soaked walls ignited with a thunderous asterisk whump. The warehouse became a chimney, a roaring, screaming oven. Bumpy watched from a safe distance, his pocket watch open. He listened to the cacophony from within, the screams of men who suddenly understood the horror they had inflicted on others, the panicked gunshots fired at locked doors, the roar of the inferno. He listened for 4 minutes. Then he listened until the screams stopped, and the central beam gave way with a groan, and the roof collapsed in a monumental shower of sparks. 12 bodies were recovered from the ashes. Thomas Whitmore was identified only by the melted, distorted star of a sheriff's badge fused to his chest bone. The next morning, Agent Morrison stood at the smoldering ruins with Detective Brennan. "This was Johnson," Morrison stated flatly. "Probably," Brennan agreed, sipping coffee from a paper cup. "Got any evidence, a witness, a weapon, or just a feeling?" Morrison stared at him, knowing the game was over. Without evidence, the case was a dead letter. He left, defeated by the very silence Bumpy had mastered. A week later, Bumpy stood at Marcus Washington's graveside. Angela Washington was there, her 2 young daughters placing dandelions on the fresh earth. "It's done, Angela," Bumpy said. She nodded, looking at the headstone. The price was high. "It always is," he replied, "but the bill was paid in full." He placed a single white rose, Marcus's favorite, against the granite. The phone on Bumpy Johnson's nightstand never rang with that particular terror again. In the years that followed, the KKK would occasionally test the waters in Harlem. A pamphlet here, a whispered threat there. But it never took root. Stories persisted of late-night visits, of quiet conversations where only 5 words were needed to end any discussion. Remember Marcus Washington. Remember fire. It was not justice as the law books defined it. It was something older, something more brutal, and something the neighborhood understood completely. It was balance. It was an eye for an eye, a fire for a fire, measured out in 4-minute increments until the ledger was clean. It was the only kind of accounting that worked in a world where the law looked the other way, and a man's worth was measured by the lengths he would go to protect his own.